Welcome to today's edition of Daytime Dialogues. It's my great pleasure to welcome back Gil Hoffman. Gil is not only a noted journalist, having had a very distinguished career at the Jerusalem Post, but now for almost 2 years, he's been the executive director and the executive editor of Honest Reporting, a very important nonprofit that works to set the record straight, that calls out lies about Israel and the Jewish people, and does so in all of the various forms of media that you can imagine, from quick tweets and to full-length articles, and it continues to grow under Gil's stewardship. And so, Gil, thank you so much for joining me from your home in Yerushalayim.
Pleasure being with you, Rabbi.
So let me just jump into it right now. What is the thing right now that Honest Reporting is dealing with?
Right now, there are fires that were finally put out in northern Israel, and the international community didn't seem to care that 25 Disneylands were on fire. Where was Greta Thunberg and all the environmental activists out there? They seem to have a problem when there's anything that's happening in Arab countries, but when it affects the only Jewish state, they're strangely silent.
And so how do you call them out on it?
Uh, we sometimes have to be sarcastic and cynical and remind the world that we are the most discriminated against people in the world. We are the only state that's facing existential threats. We were attacked on October 7th, and we cannot let anyone forget it.
And to go back to that question of October 7th, at the beginning of the war, everyone seemed to have jumped on Israel's side, or at least been quiet. And now the tide has seemed to shift entirely, where the presumption is that Israel is committing acts of inhumane treatment, starving people, doing all sorts of terrible things in Gaza. There are terrible things that have happened in Gaza, but that Israel is the cause of all of that. How do you account for that shift?
Rabbi, you must have kept 2 days of Yom Tov there on Simchat Torah, because by the second day, the entire world had already turned against us. We had exactly 1 day of grace. That's it. Um, we had possibly the greatest empathy that there's ever been for Israel that day in the international media. But by the following day, we already started fighting back in a way that the world might have thought excessive. And suddenly we're not the underdog anymore. Suddenly we're not the victim anymore. And now there are other victims, and the world loves siding with victims. And the world sides with underdogs. And Israel is seen as an aggressor wrongly. They're seen as not an underdog wrongly. Um, and it did not take very long for the support of the international media, and then later on the support of international leaders, and then people around the world. But we are going to continue doing what we have to do to prevent Hamas from being able to be in power, to prevent anyone in Gaza from being able to attack us again, to enable the people in the south to live peacefully and freely, and the Gazans too, for that matter, not under Hamas oppression. And then we've got a situation in the north, 5,000 rockets and missiles and drones have been fired from there without attracting the world's attention in any way, and we're not doing enough to fix that.
So when Honest Reporting first started, it actually has the Chicago connection. It was
Sure.
based on a picture that was taken of a young man from Chicago who was being beaten up by terrorists. And unfortunately, the way the New York Times published the picture, it was suggested that it was Jewish soldiers beating up a poor Arab. Honest Reporting started, then it was reactive. It saw something wrong, and then it wanted to fix it. Today, is Honest Reporting also proactive in its response, in its actions?
Absolutely. We're constantly educating young people around the world. We could have been lazy and rested on our laurels and just reached out to people over 70 who scream at CNN all day and hope the TV can hear them. But then we wouldn't have had an impact. We decided to reach out to young people who are the leaders of tomorrow, who have to understand Israel better for Israel to have a future. And that's why we went from having 4 million people see our content on social media in 2022. And we upped it from 4 million to 123 million in 2023. And it's growing beyond that for 2024. And it's not just because it's a war, it's because we are constantly putting out information that goes viral, that people learn from. We're quick, we're immediate in answering what's going on and in being proactive in what people need to know.
So I was speaking with some colleagues today, and in the conversation, it was a question that in the United States, we seem to view things in a very pessimistic fashion. Whereas when you go to Israel, there are dangers, there are threats, but just today is Yom Yerushalayim, and there was the parade in Yerushalayim. From the scenes that I saw online, it seemed to have been as joyous and as celebratory as ever. When you were in the United States, did you encounter that same kind of divide of attitude and perspective?
Yes, people in American Jews in America are very worried about us. American Jews are pessimistic about Israel's future. They're pessimistic about their future, and about their future, they're right. About Israel, they're wrong. I read them the polls about how 2/3 of Israelis said they're more scared today to go to America than ever before. And people were surprised by that. They're scared to come here, and they're wrong. All the airlines should be flying over here. The ones who have canceled or temporarily are wrong. This is the safest place for a Jew to be in spite of everything. And I went to college campuses in Chicago. I spoke at Northwestern, where I'm a less proud alum than I've been before. I went to the University of Chicago and spoke there. I went to the encampment at DePaul and met some very confused people over there. Um, at least people here understand what's going on.
Can you talk a little bit about the confused people at DePaul?
Sure. I asked them, I said, I was just in Gaza, and the people in Gaza, they don't understand what you're doing. They want Hamas to be overthrown. Want their oppressors to be gone to have a brighter day. What you're campaigning for here is for your university to stop buying computers with an Intel chip inside because it was made in Haifa by Jews, Christians, and Muslims that work in the factory over there. How does that help a Gazan in any way? And they continued munching on their baklava and that they have for free over there, and telling me, well, we have nothing against Jews, only against Zionists.
And is that something that honest reporting gets involved in also, or is honest reporting focusing more on the perspective of Israel?
So first of all, we're training educators and that work on campus through Chabad and other organizations. But we are constantly putting out content for the students. 45% of the people who see our content are under 25, which is important. It shows we're getting out of echo chamber. And we're also giving them hope that you can fight an uphill battle because, obviously we're at a disadvantage on TikTok, but we're fighting over there. And they're at a disadvantage on their college campus, but they can continue fighting over there too. Us and college students, we've got similar odds against us, but similar determination to move forward.
So if you were to look forward in the next year or two, where do you think honest reporting will have shifted some of its focus, or is it going to be, do you think it's going to be more of the same?
Well, we've already shifted the focus to be more immediate in dealing with the news. We've already shifted the focus that the overwhelming majority of what we do is for social media, with all due respect to our website that will be going up online, a new revamped version quite soon. And with all due respect to our subscribers, which everyone should become at honestreporting.com/subscribe. But right now, following us on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and I guess still Facebook, LinkedIn also are all very important. That's the way we can reach out to more people, share our stuff. So that's going to continue to go in that direction, but we'll have much more of an educational component when we have a more functional website. We're going to be using AI to monitor the media. there are all kinds of anti-Israel organizations that use AI to hurt Israel. Well, let's use AI to help Israel. We have 8 categories of media bias. Well, right now I have a team of 3 writers and researchers and editors who look through countless articles every day. They can be helped if those 7 categories, 8 categories of media bias are identified by AI, and there'll be a tool that can go through any article and indicate where there is media bias. And the hope would be after we harness and optimize the AI, we can then release it to the public, and anybody sitting at home can read an article in the New York Times and think, I know it's biased, but I'm not sure how, and they'll double click, and then they'll see how.
What can you give me some examples of the 8 categories of bias?
Oh, sure. I mean, if you leave out information that's important to understand something, if you have an article that makes a point of being entirely focused on the opposite point of view. If you have an article that doesn't give the necessary background information. Right now, you have articles that talk about the Gaza war without mentioning how it started, which is irresponsible. Um, you've basic facts, calling Tel Aviv the capital of Israel. Unfortunately, the media has deteriorated more into that recently. Um, encourage people to Google the categories of media bias of honest reporting.
Wow. So, do people bring to you the issues that trouble them, or do you have a team out there finding them, or is
Yes,
it both? The yes is to both. The
no,
yes is,
3 people is not enough, with all due respect.
and so people send you
Yes, yes, yes.
about this. And do you encourage people to do that? Or
Yes, and I get stuff constantly myself, and also our email address for that purpose, which is action@honestreporting.com. 3 people is not enough to monitor media from 190 countries, with all due respect. Even if we focus only on the English-speaking countries, it's not enough for America. Um, and so we have people who constantly are sharing us information from seeing things that bother them. And that's why, whenever I speak to groups, one of the questions that I ask them is how many of you have canceled a subscription to a newspaper? You usually get about a third of the room raising their hands with pride. And I look at them and I say, you're wrong. You've made a mistake. You haven't hurt that newspaper by taking away $100. You've hurt Israel. We need educated, pro-Israel people to be reading the mainstream and social media, and then themselves, if you have a following on social media or of any kind, please point things out that are wrong. And if you want to utilize us for having a following, send it to us at action@honestreporting.com, and we'll decide how to handle it. If it's something that can be fixed behind the scenes, we have relationships with the media outlets. Maybe we can fix something minutes after it went online. Nobody has to write a letter to the editor anymore that'll be printed 2 weeks after they read it. Now you can get things changed online within seconds. And if there's a pattern of egregious behavior, then that's why we have the articles in the social media to make things better, to help restore the deterrence of Israel on the media battlefield.
so on that note, is the New York Times as bad as people say it is?
Look, the New York Times covers the Israeli-Palestinian conflict more than any other media outlet on earth, and that includes every media outlet in Israel. They, and obviously, in that, if 2/3 of their articles are anti-Israel, that's a lot more than any other media outlet on earth, even if a third of them are not so bad. So yes, there are problems in the New York Times every single day. And they have to be fixed, or people will get an incorrect impression because they have a very educated readership. They deserve to win the Pulitzer. They did good work, but they also need to be monitored constantly.
So if someone sees a problem in an article in the New York Times, by the way, the 2/3, 1/3 breakdown of Israel coverage, is that about right, or is that just
There was a study There was a study by Lilach Sigan that was printed in the Jerusalem Post, and we followed up on it on our social media. The New York Times, the number of articles they've written since October 7th about Israel, more than 3,000. It's just wow.
Mhm.
But yeah, also we also found over there they were employing people infiltrated on October 7th, that crossed ethical as well as physical boundaries. You've had people that we found there who praised Hitler on social media. Um, there are some problematic things going on.
So someone reads one of those two-thirds of their articles and they're troubled by it. What should be the next step?
If they have a following on social media, they should absolutely write something that indicates why it's problematic. They should give it to us to advance it further. And yes, still write letters to the editor and still write in talkbacks. There are talkbacks on their articles online. And I know that some people consider it a waste of time, but you never know. When are you going to have an Esther moment where you make a difference? You change someone's point of view. And one of the questions I get asked most when I'm in speaking tours, and I've spoken to all 50 states, is people complain. They say, I post things that are pro-Israel every day. I get 4 likes. I post a cute picture of my grandson in a Halloween costume, and I get 400. How do I make it better? And I tell them, first of all, that just as many people saw the picture that what you posted about Israel as saw the picture of your cute grandson. You're educating people, and they might not click like because of pressures in their social group. There might be somebody from Pakistan that works in their office and they don't want to offend them. Um, but you're having an impact. And another thing I tell people is you should be a mensch, because if you're a good person, then people will trust you as a source of information.
In the United States, what is the best source of information about Israel?
The Jerusalem Post, Times of Israel, I-24, ILTV, where my wife is the editor-in-chief. Uh, I know these are not American media outlets, but they are English media outlets that could be read in America. And I don't think that anybody in America should get their news about Israel from any American media outlet that parachutes people to here for 3 years at best, 3 minutes sometimes already reporting. They can't understand what's going on here the way that a journalist at the Jerusalem Post can, for instance, who's been covering a particular beat for 30 years and has all the connections necessary. Just like it doesn't make sense for me to get my news about the Chicago Cubs from Yediot Achronot.
Well, first of all, when the Yediot Achronot publishes something about the Cubs, please send me a copy. It'd be interesting.
Okay.
But in addition to that, so the Israeli news sources, but within the Israeli news sources, there's also sometimes very strong criticism that an American audience may not understand, whether it's because tone sometimes in Israel is different or all of the references. So we're looking, if you were to prioritize Times of Israel and Jerusalem Post, which may have a better understanding of the American audience, or all of them are still important places.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't understand the nuance, then learn. You have a responsibility if you want to be an educated news consumer to research the depth of the issues about what's going on here, and don't be shallow. Obviously, yes, Israeli media have more of a watchdog role in our democracy in Israel, of overseeing the government and trying to make things better around here. And that's nothing to apologize for.
Yesterday, CBS had an exclusive of a former military intelligence officer, the first to have resigned over the war, who also happened to be Jewish. And it was on the national news, it was on the radio, it was a big splash. In your mind, how detrimental is something like that to the story of what's happening today in Israel?
There's no doubt that American media have an impact on what gets read in the White House, and the White House puts pressure on Israel. And winning on the media battlefield is the key to winning on the military battlefield. It Israel normally fights wars that are very short. Because of international pressure, this war is very much the exception, the longest war in Israel's history. And it matters. It matters what's being said about us. We are not an Am Levadad Yishkon. We're not a nation that dwells alone. We are under a microscope. Israel and the Jewish people, we've always been, we always will be. And we have to be very, very careful.
Does it, in your experience, do the people in the State Department, the people in the White House, understand biases against Israel, or do they play into them?
No, they play into them. They're getting some news from Haaretz. They're getting news from the New York Times, and they've misunderstood a lot about what's going on over here, and it's a problem.
And is it a problem also within Israel itself? Are there members of the Israeli public who say, well, if America doesn't like us, or if this appears, then we're in trouble, and they're ready to chuck everything and move on, change their positions? Or is Israel hanging in there strong?
Oh, well, Israel's hanging in there strong, but no, they don't understand America. I mean, they think the entire world is out to get us. They think Kol Olam Nigdeinu, the entire world is against us. And they think that every American Jew is about to be incinerated like the Holocaust. I mean, they think that Americans are in much greater danger than they are. I mean, they're in danger, but not as bad as Israelis think.
And what are today, what are let me go back a step. Al Jazeera, you've reported about Al Jazeera, about the banning of Al Jazeera. Can you explain when you say that Al Jazeera is a arm of Hamas or supportive of Hamas, what you mean by that?
Sure. Al Jazeera is Qatari state media. It is a propaganda tool of the government of Qatar. And people need to know that. I mean, Russia and China have 24-hour English media outlets. So does Iran, by the way. And I don't think too many Americans trust what they read or see on Iranian press TV or on CN TV from China or on RT Russia Today, where I was interviewed in 2009, right after Netanyahu came to power. The two experts were me and Noam Chomsky. And they asked both of us, well, why did Netanyahu come back to power? And they let him go first because he's older than me. And Noam Chomsky said, because Netanyahu has had disputes with Barack Obama and Israelis don't like black people. Okay, so people know not to trust Russia Today. They don't know to not trust Al Jazeera. And Al Jazeera, yes, just
But
like
I'm saying,
Hamas is armed by
let me
Qatar.
stop you for a minute. Why? Why can't people just apply the same rule that they do to Russia and China and Iran to Qatar?
They don't realize the danger that Qatar is doing. More has to be put out about that. They don't realize what Qatar is doing to our college campuses. How Qatar has made Northwestern a dangerous place to send a Jewish child, and it's true of Cornell, and it's true of Carnegie Mellon, and too many universities in America that have made it unsafe for Jews to be there because of Qatar's money. And yes, Al Jazeera funds Hamas, and the blur between Hamas and Al Jazeera in this war, it's been increasingly unclear. You've had terrorists of Hamas that are employed by Al Jazeera. You've had Al Jazeera put out very obvious lies about what Israel is doing in Gaza, to the point that at one point even Hamas apologized for what Al Jazeera reported and said it's not true. Um, so that's what's going on in this war. They've been an active participant against Israel on both the military and the media battlefields. Now, Rabbi, you asked about the government decision to temporarily, for a period of 35 days, with an opportunity to renew, close down the Israel office of Al Jazeera. The impact of that is absolutely nothing, because they're reporting from Gaza, right? We can't stop them over there. They're reporting from Ramallah, a 15-minute drive north from here in Jerusalem. They're not reporting from Malcha, from across from Teddy Stadium with a view of the mall. that they're not doing anymore because Israel closed down that office. So the Israeli point of view is much harder to get on Al Jazeera right now. And the Gazan point of view is completely on Al Jazeera, not limited in any way. What did they do?
So does Israel have any good options? Is
First of
closing
all, it was good that they closed it anyway. I mean, it's a symbolic step. It's a statement to the world and everything. We might look undemocratic, but it reminds people that it's been closed down in countries around the world, including Egypt and Saudi Arabia. So that's important. But they're going to be back when the war is over, and that'll actually help Israel because the reporters who are here who speak Hebrew are going to be reporting again. Um, I feel bad for them. I know them personally, and they don't all mean against us. Not everybody there is evil.
Can you speak for a couple of minutes about the numbers, the demographics, the number of injured and killed that are coming from the health ministry in Gaza? Have you caught those numbers being lies?
Yes, Honest Reporting was among the first that reported that it was mathematically impossible for there to be the numbers that the Hamas propaganda ministry, they don't really have a health ministry, told the world. The Palestinians have a health ministry. It's in Ramallah. It's run by the Palestinian Authority. They offered to Hamas on October 7th their services and they were turned down. And so you've had various algorithms of numbers going up by the same exact percent every day. The amount of women and children goes up much faster than the men, which is statistically impossible. And the world buys it because everybody likes balance. The IDF has these numbers, and what does the other side say? And they don't understand that the IDF has actual data that's reliable, while the other side, it's coming out of their tuchus, Rabbi. It's not based on anything, not based on hospitals, not based on cemeteries. They don't differentiate between people who die from smoking and in car accidents. They don't differentiate between people killed by their own rockets. Their numbers are completely and utterly meaningless.
Do you have any idea of what the real number might be?
No. It's a tragedy. Everybody who dies in war is a tragedy. Every Gazan who has died in this war, even the worst terrorist, it's sad. These are human beings. But all of them, without exception, it's the fault of Hamas. Hamas started this war. Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, started this war on the morning of October 7th. Do people even remember what the biggest headlines in the world were in September of 2023? I'm not asking you about the 1950s here. I'm asking you about September 2023. Do you remember, Rabbi?
You're gonna
You're an educated news consumer.
you're going to have to remind me what you're referring to.
Sure, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia said in an interview with Fox News at the General Assembly of the United Nations that he's going to normalize relations with Israel. This would have, for all intents and purposes, ended the Arab-Israeli conflict, except for allies of Iran and the Palestinians. And the Gazans, the amount of workers coming into Israel, according to that plan, would have doubled, revitalizing the Gazan economy. This is all something that Iran and its proxies like Hamas wanted to stop by attacking Israel that day.
Gil, just one final question because our time truly is up. If people want to get involved with honest reporting, if they want to be supportive of honest reporting, what should be their next step?
So we've mentioned go to subscribe at honestreporting.com. Honestreporting.com/subscribe. Follow us on social media, but also we're a very small organization. With all due respect, we need to get bigger. Please go to honestreporting.com/donate. Give whatever you can. I appreciate that you support a lot of other organizations that have been instrumental in helping Israel during this war in many ways. But right now we're getting into the playoffs of this war. During the regular season, you needed to support organization A, B, C, and D. But now for the end, this is where you need to be supporting an organization that fights for Israel in the media, because this is where the end game, the how Israel is going to be remembered in retrospect, is going to be decided, and we can't afford to lose.
Gil, thank you so very much for all that you do for Klal Yisrael, and thank you for your time today. Continue fighting this good fight. We need you, we need your staff, and we need all of the people who stand up for Medinat Yisrael and for the truth. Have a very good evening. Thank you so very much.
Pleasure, Rabbi.
Bye-bye.